Okay. All right, everyone, I think we're going to get started. So thank you for coming to our October Wildlife Society meeting. We have our guest speaker, Dr. Michael Van Cleef, here with us, who is going to be talking about invasive strike team. So he has a presentation prepared about invasives here in New Jersey and deer, basically what's being done to manage them and what you guys can do to also help with invasives management. So before I let him take the floor, I just wanted to bring your attention to some events that we have coming up. So this Friday and next Friday, we're going to be having a Bat House Building Day. It's going to be super fun, Halloween themed. We have some food planned to be there, and it's basically going to be right outside of the PSARF building, which is the building right behind the ENR. It's back that way. So if you're interested, definitely stop by. We're going to be drilling grooves into wood this week, and then next week will be the actual construction. So definitely stay tuned for that. And then next Monday, we're going to have our first quiz bowl practice. So Connor will be organizing that. And if you want to just give an update or something about that.
So we'll be doing it here again. It'll be next Monday at 6 p.m. It is quiz bowl, which is basically wildlife trivia. We're organizing and competing in teams against each other. We'll have a brief kind of intro and teach everyone the rules, and then break whoever attends into two different teams and compete and see who knows more trivia than the other. And there's no prior knowledge needed. You come to enough practices and you start catching on. Kind of like there's a theme to everything. You'll see repeated questions, and it's a great time. Hope people can make it out.
Yep. So we'll be meeting in this room at the normal meeting time. And then our last event that we have scheduled is for Wednesday, November 10th. We're going to be going to saw-whet owl banding. So Tyler, if you could just explain a little bit about what that is and what we'll be doing.
Yeah, my name's Tyler. I'm a grad student here. I know a bunch of you, but so for the last 6 years or so, 7 years, nope, 8 years, we've been banding northern saw-whet owls on their southbound migration in the fall. This is a really small woodland owl. It's our smallest owl in eastern North America, and they're migratory. And this time of year, they're traveling through New Jersey, and we catch them and band them, and part of a network of people who do the same thing, trying to understand their migrations, population dynamics, that kind of thing. And on November 10th, we're opening it up to you guys to come visit the banding station, hopefully get to see some of these owls. We usually catch multiple every night, but it's super variable depending on weather, so it's always a crapshoot. But you're more than welcome to come out, hopefully see some owls, see how we catch them, how we band them. And Morgan and Connor have been, and maybe some of you have been as well. But in the past, I'm not sure, but ask Ben if you have any questions about the details. But it's always fun, very interesting thing to do, and we really enjoy having you guys come visit.
Yeah, so we'll be sending out information and a sign-up sheet for that soon, just so that we get, we're trying to cap it at around 15 people, just because of COVID restrictions and whatnot. So we'll be sending out a form for that and try to arrange carpooling rides as well. So thank you, Tyler.
Yep. And
without further ado, Dr. Van Cleef, please take it away. I don't have a clicker, but you're more than free to use my laptop.
All right. I just hit return, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I am with the FOVOS, which stands for Friends of Hopeful Valley Open Space, New Jersey Strike Team, and I'm the program director. We just had our 14th annual meeting last week. So we have some history. Just going to give you some of the quick background before we get into the whole thing. So who is the strike team basically? So, we have goals like a lot of old conservation groups. We're trying to protect natural lands through coordinated invasive species management. And the idea was 14 years ago, there was no sort of centralized entity thinking about invasive species and gathering the observations of everyone and putting them all into one pool and then reflecting them back out to the community. So that's primarily our role. And we do some basic bins of activities. So we do mapping, data analysis, and reporting. We do outreach. We do training sessions and workshops. And You know, the simple stuff that I always like to say, we find and kill plants, search and eradicate invasive species. We usually focus on emerging invasive species. So these are things that aren't yet widespread, and I'll get into that in the presentation. So we have a bunch of people involved with the project. Everyone here is part-time. We're primarily funded through grants and contracts that we have. So it's good that we have a larger group of people to pick from, but don't be misled. We're all part-time. We have a 4-person steering committee that helps us get a sense of the entire state. They all have different expertise and have been around a lot. And then this is a really important component to us. We have a technical advisory committee. So these people know something about just about anything alive that could be imagined, from pests and pathogens, plants, wildlife, mammals, fish, marine, the whole 9 yards. So basically this group meets every year, and that's when we figure out our plant lists or our species list. Sorry, I'm very plant centered. The entire, everything, all taxa. So we look at what data has come in the last year, added up to what we've already collected. And then we sort of discuss what should we do for the list of the next year. So I think you guys are kind of tuned into some of this already based on being in this group. But the whole point is not having the blood in your eyes, kill invasive plants as your goal. The goal is to protect these things. And I think it's super important. Every time I do a presentation, I lead with, these are the good things. This is why we care about invasive species that threaten these things. And if you haven't been out in New Jersey exploring it, I'm not sure how far along you guys are exactly, but New Jersey, just every corner has something very cool and unique. 2,000 different native species, all kinds of great stuff. It is amazing. We are pretty lucky to have a lot of different things in a short amount of distance. And it's just all those kind of stats, We're important location for bog turtles. We have a disproportionate amount of the entire population of federally listed bog turtles. Same for this globally rare northern meadowlark butterfly. Bobcats still, and we got the good wild stuff like timber rattlesnakes are in New Jersey. Black bears the size of a Volkswagen Bug. We got that stuff. This is New Jersey, but we have all this stuff. We do have him too. And the goal is fairly straightforward. Beyond the species, the goal is you obviously can't manage every single individual species, right? So the goal is to have healthy habitats. So, forest would be the predominant cover in New Jersey, and it is the predominant natural cover. You want a forest to look like this. And for the most part, they do not. And then we'll get into the reasons. But you want all of these things. You want advanced regeneration of trees. You want all kinds of regeneration of trees and shrubs, and you want a diverse bird layer as well. This is I'm not sure if this graphic's been updated since 2010 or not, but that's the context. As many good things as we still have, we have lost a lot. But there's still a lot of natural cover, and there are still 2 million acres up for grabs. They haven't been protected or developed out of our 5 million or so acres. So yeah, it gives you context for what's going on over the last 50 years or so. We've done all of these unpleasant things to nature, right? Well, we pretty much do what we want, and then these are the consequences. Destruction, overabundant deer, invasives, soil modifications, fire regimes are all completely lost. Stream flows, habitat fragmentation, and not last but not least, climate change. So my glasses keep fogging out. I just gotta pull this down a little bit. So yeah, there's been about 10,000 non-native plant introductions. About 1,000 of them are now in our flora. They don't need any more human intervention. They spread on their own. But not many of them out of that total are invasive. So the total is 48 widespread invasive plants. But there's 94 that are emergent. So this 48 can get significantly higher if nothing is done about these. Yep.
What is the distinction between non-native plant and invasive?
So I think I might have a slide. Well, so invasive basically is it takes over large areas to the exclusion of other species. So there's plenty, most of these are things on the roadside. You know, they don't really have a huge impact on natural systems and how they work. These guys do. So it's really just a matter of abundance, really. You know, and further, it's sort of like you could see things that are temporarily abundant. So, a good example: a field gets abandoned and it becomes all yellow rocket is different names for it. Sea of yellow for a year or two, and then other plants come in and it goes away. Well, if you can't hold your ground over time, you're not invasive. And in the scheme of stewardship, do you really think I'm going to waste my time on something that's going to go away in 2 years without me doing anything? That would be silly. So, you know, things like that would not be invasive. Yeah. Yeah, but that's one of the pros that excludes other species. So yeah, there's a whole kind of a bunch of attributes, people starting from probably starting from the late 50s, but you know, picked up a lot of steam, I would say, in the 80s, thinking about why are these things, why are they what they are? So in New Jersey and other places, this is a huge central organizing theme. They are basically species like this, which have weedy attributes. And still have not gotten used to the fogging in my glasses. They're tolerant of a wider set of conditions, wider variety of light, soil, moisture. They mature quickly and make lots of seeds. So it's the weedy characteristics, and then the biggest driver of plant communities is deer, because they're so overabundant. So when I have my graduate degree from Rutgers, and this is kind of the things I studied. I studied like the American bittersweet versus the Asian bittersweet. Put them through all kinds of different tests, basically, of going from a seed to a plant, different stages, and said, how are they different? And it was not necessarily one stark difference. It was just, I'm a little better at you at this. I'm a little better at you than that. I'm a little better at that. So it's, you know, it could have been same at everything and really good at one thing, but it turned out that in other congeners that I studied, the differences were pretty subtle. The difference between Asiatic and American bittersweet is that it could germinate from a seed and survive as a seedling in the shade of a forest. So why is that important? Because forests aren't static. When those trees fall, it has essentially what we want from native trees. It has advanced regeneration. So it's there when something happens, it's ready to go. And the American bittersweet did not have that ability. So just, you know, some of the differences can be subtle levels of tolerance. And this is what I use all the time for giving different talks. I used to try to explain this chart in 10,000 words or less, you know, and it's just like, Mike, you love spreadsheets, make this a spreadsheet. So the gist is, when a field gets abandoned, often in New Jersey, it becomes autumn olive. Almost completely autumn olive. There's little bits of other things, right? But essentially, that is a very common theme in New Jersey. This is just a handful, a small sampling of the species that would be in there that are no longer there, or they're in tiny little amounts. So it really comes down to timing. And I picked autumn olive intentionally because, you know, you get these arguments. So you do. I'm trying to help out. Well, autumn olive, it makes tons of flowers. The pollinators are all over them. That's true. They make fruit, and wildlife is all over them, from chickadees to bears. Before I killed all the autumn olive at my house, I would hear in the middle of the night cracking sounds. The bears were pulling down huge chunks of it so they could get at the berries. I'm like, that's pretty valuable food if they're willing to go through that much trouble. The problem is they only make flowers in May. Problem is they only make fruit of one kind, of one nutrient type in September, October. So, you know, if you had to collect all of your food in 2 different months and it was perishable, how would you feel in July or August? You'd be gone, right? So, you know, that's basically what's going on. You know, we're basically breaking the food web. We're simplifying in large chunks where there's dominance of invasive species and not a variety of species. Yeah, so deer per square mile, European was estimated to be 10. Deer were almost extirpated from New Jersey around 1900. There was literally 10 or 12 deer left, not per square mile, per state. There was almost none left because commercial hunting had eliminated them. So there was a whole program to reintroduce the deer to New Jersey. By 72, we were back to where we were pre-European settlement. But, you know, nothing like a good thing, right? You know, this data is every year, over 100 per square mile in Hopewell. I picked an area of the Northern Highlands and said 50 as some kind of average, but it might actually be more like 60 or 70. So it's less in some places than other places, but it's nowhere near where it's supposed to be. Everywhere is deer overabundance. So we have this problem. Invasive species. So prior to the 1950s, there was almost no mention of invasive species. I did a report for Watchung Reservation a couple of years ago, and there was a historic botanical survey there, and it said the only real problem is Japanese honeysuckle. There's a couple of tree of heaven, and they just planted a hedgerow of multiflora rose. So no one was really even thinking it was a problem. This is 1950s. All right, so you guys are young, right? But like this is blinks of blink of an eye, a nano, half a micro blink of an eye from nature's point of view. 50, 70 years, that's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. The amount of change in a lifetime or slightly less is off the charts. We're demanding too much change in too small of a time. So if you introduced one invasive species every 25 years, would that be a problem? Probably not. Things would have times to adapt. But we're throwing hundreds of species at the wall, and some are sticking really good. And it's changing things too fast, too much, too fast. That's why I often say with stewardship, the idea is to slow this the hell down. That's the goal. You know, people say, oh, you want to return to 1492? I said, I would be happy if it was 1992. Like, come on. This is changing so fast, so much, we have to slow it down. So yeah, so you know, beginning in the 80s, we started to get things like stiltgrass and barberry. You know, so they're even newer, like they're very new in the scheme of things. 40 years ago, they started getting really bad. That's again, tiny amount of time. Yeah, so just keeping that time scale in perspective, I think is important. So we do 10 deer per square mile is associated with these things. Historic estimates kind of coincide with some of these studies. And, there's way more than that in places like Hopewell. And then this is, one of the consequences. It isn't, nature is the last thing most people are thinking about. Let's just be honest. They're thinking about hitting it with their car. They're thinking about their landscape plants being eaten. They're thinking about getting Lyme disease. And I say, well, think about the forest. If this is what convinced you, I don't really give a flying hoot what you think about the forest. If this is your motivator, that is fine by me. I don't care if what your motivation is. But we need to get the deer population down. And this is generally the problem in a nutshell. So again, I'm using Hopewell. I've worked at Hopewell quite a bit. This is the forest cover at Hopewell. Highly fragmented with a couple of good, better nodes. This goes up into a much bigger node of the sour. But deer love all these edges. They love all the farm fields filled with soybeans and corn. They love the suburban neighborhoods with food where no one can get that. No hunters can get it from the houses. So you have excellent deer habitat, you have insufficient deer management, and then you get all these problems. So I could share, if you want, but we came up with, we called it the stakeholder slides. And after all these years of trying to figure out how can we solve deer overabundance, let's just write it down. Who are the players? What do they do that makes it worse? Can they or do they do that makes it better? And it turns out that it is a sociological problem. This is not a management problem. We are humans, and we can make anything we want go extinct. It's our God-given right. All right. But it is kind of true. So Sean was telling me, like I said, well, in March, they really cluster up and they could be in groups of 100 in Hopewell, just hypothetically. People well armed in helicopters could shoot all of them in 3 minutes. I'm just saying, we have the ability to do it if we want to. That's all I'm saying. It's not an impossible problem to solve. It is a problem that portions of our society do not want solved. That's the problem. It's always us. There's so many problems in the world. Is the thing itself the impossible thing, or is it us fighting with each other that makes it the impossible thing? It's usually the latter. So yeah, we can do it if we want to. There's enough force against having that happen. Quick example, I won't beat it too much. I could send you the slides if anyone is interested in that aspect of all this. But there's just our attempt to sort of understand. Early in my career, I was in a meeting as a conservation professional saying that we really have to reduce the deer herd. It's causing all these problems. Two representatives of different groups were both against me. One was hunters. 2 was animal rights advocates. Yeah. If you think about that a little bit, now you know why we can't solve the damn problem. So it is hard. It is hard.
We're just curious, why would hunters be against it?
Because it's way easier to get a deer at 100 per square mile than it is 10 per square mile. It's that simple. It's that simple. And quite frankly, the not simple part of it is to be a true, what we call a management hunter, someone who's going to take every single deer that passes under their stand, and they are going to be intelligent, amazing wildlife observationists, and they're going to know how to bait, when to hunt, how to hunt, where to hunt, how to shift from one site to another to maximize their harvest. That takes a lot of time and money and an exceptional amount of knowledge. And it basically, that defines maybe certainly less than 1% of the hunting community. So it is hunters letting does pass under their stand because they want a buck. That's part of it. But that next level of management hunting requires something that most don't have. One or the time or money or knowledge. One of those 3 things are missing. So yeah, that's part of the whole thing. So what's happening? So we get a canopy gap, that's natural. Normally, you would have had oak trees that were this tall and 40 years old, sitting there waiting for the gap to happen. As soon as it did, they whoop, right in. There are no oaks this big in most of New Jersey's forests because the deer keep eating them. So there's no advanced regeneration. But what you do have is invasive species that deer don't eat. So we're basically losing forests one piece at a time. You just don't see it because it's not happening fast enough to see what's going on. Trees live a long time. Whenever you look on the ground, and I crawl around on the ground a lot in my job. I always joke, like, I'm in my 50s and I have a job of an 8-year-old. I'm climbing rocks and crawling on the ground. But there's all these little seedlings, tulip poplar, spice bush in this case. It is all sitting there waiting for us to get the hell out of the way. Nature works. You put up a fence or you have a very good deer management program and nature responds. It did not forget how to work. We just have to allow that to happen. Yeah, so there's kind of a few flavors of destruction I've labeled. So this is what you want. This one I call the empty forest syndrome. This one I call the infested forest syndrome. And I'll explain the next slide, but Aldo always has something intelligent to say. I have that. A few dozen populations in New Jersey. Yeah, I'm working on trying to get some money. But yes, we do. I might not have that slide. I'll very briefly mention that this is often the case where you haven't had agricultural tilling in the past. Agricultural tilling very much destroys the soil relative to a native forest that hasn't been altered. So you often get no growth. After all the natives are removed by the deer, you get no growth until a canopy gap opens, typically. So there's an interaction between light and soil. On post-agricultural soils, it is an F show. It really is horrible. The soil's been altered, really favors weeds. It really throws the balance towards invasives. When trees go down, you get this. So we're losing all these ash trees, emerald ash borer. They tended to be on post-agricultural soils. We have forests that are just going to get very much worse than they are now, especially those on post-agricultural soils. So an emerging invasive is something that has demonstrated the potential to become widespread. So it might not be, like barberry or stiltgrass, but it has places where it is that it looks pretty bad. It's just not at a lot of places yet. So our point is, yeah, it's hard to predict in ecology, and we tend to be conservative on our list. If we think there's a chance, we don't know. We don't know the mind of God for crying out loud, but we know enough to say this one seems highly threatening. This one maybe not so much. So that's when we make our list and we have a set of emerging invasive species. So the other thing we do, so we have 136 targets. Tyler had mentioned I'm a plant person. So there's plants and there's everything else. 94 different plants on our list, 42. So we have 136 target species. These are emerging species that we call targets. Yeah.
What animal does it include insects and stuff?
It's just like, because it could be a microbe or it could be a mammal. So yeah, I guess they're all animal kingdom, I guess. Right? Yeah, that's my bias. So one of the things we do to try to help, other folks in the conservation community understand what they might focus on their own preserves. Some of them are called stage 0. So that means they might not be in the state yet. And they may be in the state, but have only up to 10 different known populations. So if you own a nature preserve and you find a stage 0, the first thing you should do is get rid of it. You know, it should be the highest possible stewardship priority that you could have. Is get rid of that and then get rid of those, then those, then those. So, you know, oftentimes, and part of my frustration that sort of led to the strike team is the human mind says, okay, here's my preserve I gotta manage. Look at all the barberry. I gotta do something about the barberry. Yeah, okay, but you have 3 Seabold viburnums. You should know that that is a threat. And we're at our level that we look down on things, we know that that is a serious threat. We are telling you, stop for a day on your barberry and kill that Seabold viburnum before it spreads. You know, it's just trying to be as effective and efficient as possible with the amount of resources we have. So, you know, that's the gist of these stages. And, you know, unfortunately, like I mentioned, there's, well, these are, oh yeah, we have watch species and then widespread. I mentioned there's 48 widespread invasive plants. When we started this 14 years ago, we considered there to be 35. So we're watching and documenting more and more species become invasive. So 13 additional species have gotten on the radar as widespread in 14 years. That is too fast, much, much too fast. And there's plenty of these that are just right on the cusp of becoming widespread. So we're sort of documenting the rate of change as well. Yep.
Where would spotted magpie be at?
Things change fast with bugs. It was stage 0 2 years ago. I think we did change it. What did we make it?
Like age 19?
Well, after 3 you're widespread. So, but yeah, it became. I think we made it 2 or 3 this year when we look at it in the winter. But yeah, it's essentially widespread. Bugs can change very quickly. You know, that's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. You know, we have a much better chance at slowing plants down than we do bugs. Now, Asian longhorn beetle was eradicated. You know why? Because they're big and slow and lazy, and they didn't fly around a lot. So it could have been there for 3 years, and they only moved like 15 feet. Like, oh, okay, well, we'll cut all down the maple trees. You know, so they were actually able to get ahead of it and eradicate it. But that is probably the only insect that will ever happen to. Emerald ash borer took, I don't know, a decade to go from Michigan to here, something like that. I mean, I think the efforts could have slowed the spread, and you often see that language associated with bugs slow the spread. There's no illusion that you could stop the spread. Because if you could slow the spread, maybe you can come up with a biological control agent and limit damage, but that's still a long shot. That's still a long shot. All right. And you want to go till 7? Is that?
Yes, the.
Okay. Okay. And there's stage 0 examples like sickle leaf, Japanese spirea. You know, so someone, again, this is sort of what the strike team's about, the strength of the strike team. This is at plant was found at White Lake Natural Area in Warren County, about 20 minutes from my house. Someone said, this is a weird looking plant. They looked it up and they go, hey, Mike, you ever hear sickleweed? Is it a problem? There's this whole big patch of it there. I look it up, major big league invasive species in the Midwest. I'm like, I'll be there on the weekend with my backpack sprayer, and I am going to eliminate it. So I did that 2 or 3 times. I actually went this summer just for a fun hike. None. One win. We saved the earth. But you know, you take your victories where you can. I'm clearly being sarcastic. But that's how it's supposed to work. Yeah, I'll just let you read that. But you really do have to have some balance between humility and gumption, realizing both. You know, similar kind of thing. This is often the invasion curve. It gets introduced here, it gets detected here. The public becomes aware of it when it's way too late. And that's generally how it goes. Oh, here was my chart. About where you find the most invasives. Where deer are high and past agricultural use is present, that's the most. The least is where you have no past agricultural use and deer as well. So there's a combination between past land use is extremely important along with deer density. And if you're going to have a strategy for any piece of land, the first thing you do is address deer. You can start a deer management program that essentially says to hunters, I'm going to give you a sweet deal. You and 5 guys or 3 guys are going to be only people on here. It's all yours, as long as you keep shooting deer. And the minute you stop shooting deer is the minute you're out of the program. So that's what a nonprofit could do that has no money. Do good deer management. You go after invasives, going from the stage 0 to 1, etc. Then generally this requires a lot of resources to pay you for deer. So these are just some of our numbers. A lot of areas served to the state, a lot of detections, goodly amount of eradications, but we obviously can't keep up with the detections. But we are trying, and we get the word out to others that we don't count. We're not counting what this park commission is doing or that nonprofit's doing, but we're trying to focus people on prioritization. So yeah, we're ending up a 3-year Forest Service contract. So we're spreading all of this sort of message and planning and implementation among partners and private landowners who I have met some crazy, crazy awesome people that just do outrageous amounts of stewardship on their property. So that's been a lot of fun. And then we have contracts with various parks, municipalities around the state. And we also do obviously a lot of training and outreach. The 2020 numbers are all messed up because of COVID, obviously, and still even this year is messed up. One of the things I encourage, and it's something done in the natural areas here, Rutgers. We have local strike teams. We call them local strike teams because we're the statewide strike team. There's basically groups of volunteers, and there's usually, this is how it goes, the successful ones go. 1 or 2, maybe 3 at tops are the nucleus. And they say, we're going to go out every Wednesday morning from 9 to 12, or every Saturday from 1 to 3, whatever. It's a known, set, repeated date. People come and go on any given day. But every day, every scheduled day that week, someone shows up and does something. And that is the result. You just keep plugging away and it does get better. But you have to be persistent over long periods of time to get those results. But just volunteers who either learn on their own, maybe we gave them a little head start. Sometimes people say, hey, Mike, come walk with me in this woods near my house that I love. And we want to make it better. And then I'll do a little walk. I'll start telling them about all this stuff I just said. And then say, here's a little table, 10 things you can do in priority order. And some follow it, some don't, but whatever. The whole idea is be persistent, and you do make progress. It really is, it is amazing. So a lot of this presentation I'm just going to put for reference. If you want to look at it, it is available. I'm going to go through this pretty quick, but this is it's either 10 or 12 years of monitoring at Duke Farms, where they have a 1 square mile fence. Outside of the fence, they have the best deer management program in Jersey. So this is some of the, I will skip through sections of this. These are the methods, very simple, the forest secchi board, and then just a simple quadrant where you do presence and absence. God bless Mike Allen. I don't know if you guys have Mike Allen as a professor or anything. Good gravy. I'm glad he was part of this because the statistics changed a lot in the last 20 years since I haven't been doing it. He's a very intelligent man. So he did all the statistics on this. But, just for speed, the ratio of native to non-native species. So how did things change relative to each other? In the exposed area, went from 1.1, the ratio, so there's a little bit more native than non-native before, to 1.4. you know, the difference between 0.3 sounds mathematically different, but that's really different. That is a huge amount of progress in a relatively short period of time. Outside started off in worse condition, but it also got better. So maybe not quite as fast, not as steep, without going to every detail on the grass, but a good deer a good fence is really going to make it go fast, but a good deer management program will also get you results. That was the take-home message. So yeah, I'm gonna also here's some of the pictures. Yeah, things that you don't see in most other parts of New Jersey. Tree seedlings. That's amazing. Still some areas that are bad. More tree seedlings. Look at that. It's outcompeting stiltgrass. Stiltgrass is not you know, it's supernatural, right? All these invasives, they're supernatural. They can't be competed with. That's the problem. No, the problem is that you eat their competition. Lots of glorious tree seedlings. Oh, spice bush looks great. Look at that. A patch of wildflowers. Wow, there should only be about 3 trillion of them in New Jersey, but you know, you take them where you can get. And then control methods. You know, the first thing is what I often say when I talk to like a garden club or something like that is just stop making it worse. If there's a lot of invasive plants, the first thing you do, it's like the old joke, what do you do when you're in a hole? You stop digging. You know, so stop making it worse. Stop buying invasive plants. So we update that every year. We constantly emphasize ecological control as the real solution to invasive species. That is the actual real solution. It is not the strike team, although we play a role. The real ultimate solution is ecological control. Let native plants compete against invasive plants, and you could see their abundance go up. I'm going to skip all of this unless someone wants to talk about it. But you know, these are some of the nuts and bolts of if you're going to do use herbicide to control invasives, the different methodologies and such. And the resources we have, like you don't have to do math because we did the math for you, kind of stuff. And then I have a whole long list of different trees and shrubs and grasses and such that are invasive. I don't know if you want to spend the last 10 minutes for questions or.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if any, like, so if anyone wants, I sent you the PDF version of it too. So if anyone wants to look at any of this or have it in their file folder for resources, it's available.
great. Yeah, I can definitely send it out.
Okay. Are there questions or?
Yeah, I had a question earlier. You were
Yeah.
talking about like biological controls.
Yeah.
What would some examples of that?
So probably the best functioning one that I know of in New Jersey is the purple loosestrife beetles. So in the 90s, purple loosestrife, you would look at a disturbed wetland and it would be only purple. So, you know, it was a really, really bad one. No one would have ever thought in a million years that we were going to get rid of purple loosestrife. They released these beetles. So no, we didn't get rid of it, but basically we have a predator-prey situation now. So this year was a bit of an outbreak year for the loosestrife because the beetles were down. But then they catch up and then, you know, they just follow each other, you know, the whole link kind of thing. So that's pretty much what seems to be happening. And people will say, oh my God, all the loosestrife's back. I'm like, are you on drugs? Were you here in the 90s? Like maybe you guys weren't, all right? But that would be forgivable. But someone who was around, when you would drive by wetlands and you would see a sea of purple and then just say, oh, well, I saw some purple. Like, are you kidding? It is so much better now than it was. But they don't always work.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. And like, how do you even find stuff like that? Like, ooh, it's like, oh, okay, maybe these bugs work.
They do surveys in the country of origin of the plant. And then they say, okay, what's eating it here? Then they do, it takes like 20 years.
Yeah, and then like, how do you even know, like, to introduce something new, then you know what's gonna happen?
And you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. When it does work, it's amazing. But it'll take a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's, you know, it's a men's kind of response, like myelominate beetles were released. And like mile a minute is not slowed down, it is increased since its introduction of it. So will it ultimately catch up? Maybe, but it does not look good right now. So it's not a panacea, and it does take a lot of time and a lot of resources to do it. But yeah, when it does work, yeah. I mean, they're doing tests on Japanese knotweed now. And what else? Emerald ash borer. They released the parasitic wasp to try to get that. So we'll see what happens there.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, it's a process. I think it's the long and short of it. If you have 48 widespread invasive plants, 90 something emerging, and you get, new biocontrols at the rate of 1 every decade, you can see how it's. Yeah.
Do you have resources like that were in the PowerPoint that you mentioned on the website?
Just general about
Yeah,
invasive
well,
species.
this, I grew up on, the dead vegetable farm that was next to a nature preserve,
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure my neighbor slash cousin runs the nature preserve.
Okay.
And I'd like to get some information.
Yeah, we have a bunch of resources on our website. If you just typed in New Jersey Strike Team, it should get you there. And then this specific presentation, you get from me now. Yeah.
Thank you. This is very useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're very practical minded, so we have things like we have every single invasive species and then the options for treating it. And then we have a table with different names of treatment types: foliar spray 1, foliar spray 3, cut stuff 1, cut stuff 2, blah, blah, blah. So you can say, okay, this is my plant. These are the options of how to treat it. And this is literally how I would mix it.
Okay, perfect.
So it's really meant to be practical that way.
What is the advice you have if someone here on Rutgers wanted to start a strike team, like say for the ecological preserve? Would
That's
it be-
certainly what I was thinking.
Yeah, would it be feasible?
What do they call it now? What's the name of
The
it?
Living Eco Preserve.
Okay.
Yeah.
It used to be called Kilmer Woods. way back in the
Really?
day, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, do you think it would be feasible? And then what do you think the first steps would be?
I think probably your biggest hurdle would be herbicides.
Right.
But the one group, Foots Pond, they don't want to use herbicide.
Mm.
I'm fine, that's fine. I mean, that's not how I go at it.
Yeah.
I'm not that patient. But you can have success without herbicide. It is just a lot slower and smaller amounts of success that take longer time.
Right.
So that's kind of the downside of it.
Mhm.
So one of the things we're doing with the school, a private school, is I just had a lab with their kids. It was a high school. We went out with their kids and we had done we're in the process of making a stewardship plan for them. Identified one area very close to the building so they can get in and out during lab periods. And we cut a bunch of stuff down. And then someone's going to follow up and do the herbicide treatments when none of the kids are around.
Right.
So, you could have combinations of things like that.
Mhm.
And it's effective because this area had lots of tall shrubs and invasive trees coming up. So that would be really hard. Like you would still probably use what we call the cut stump method, even if there were no high school, nothing around. So there's basically saving the person who's going to apply herbicides a ton of time.
Mhm.
Get all the stuff out of the way, put it in piles for wildlife. Then the guy with the herbicide comes 2 months later and does the treatments when no kids are there. So there's ways around things.
Mhm.
There's ways around things.
And how long does it generally take to become like certified in pesticide use or like getting all the proper permitting and things like that?
I'm not sure what Rutgers would do if students wanted to do that. I think that probably would not work.
Right.
But basically, for me at a nature preserve, for example, so Friends of Hopewell Valley hires me, right? I can go on their preserves and kill stuff. So I had to take a class, which was like a half a day. Now it's all on the web, piece of cake. Then you work under someone who's already a certified applicator for 40 hours.
Oh, okay.
And then you can become what they call an operator.
Got it.
If you take a couple of tests and pass them, now you're an applicator
Mm.
and you could supervise operators. So they have two different levels based on basically the difference is this person has taken tests and passed them, and this person did.
Right, okay.
So there's a process for DEP. It is not onerous, but it would be hard student-wise to make that work.
Right.
If you were employees, now I'm sure there are employees on the maintenance crews on Rutgers that are certified applicators. They must be.
Do other states have strike force teams? Did you collaborate with them?
Yeah, there's different kinds of things that are out there. When all these kinds of things were happening, they were often called cooperative weed management areas. And there was a term from the West where they would just be this so-and-so watershed, and out West, that might be like, like 4 million acres, just the scale is so much bigger out there. So the whole idea is that there's a group of people that are collaborating and communicating with each other. So we have that. New York is sort of the highest peak. They took like some tiny little percent of their realty transfer tax, and they spend like $15 million a year on invasives in New York. They have what they call prisms, which are essentially weed management areas by state. So there's the Long Island, the Lower Hudson, blah, blah, blah. It's broken up at a dozen or so, maybe 6 to 10 different groups. So they break up New York into pieces. The same idea, you have an entity that is an organizing entity. New Jersey, it's just the state, and it's us as a nonprofit with no state funding whatsoever.
But have you noticed like an invasive species on like the eastern side of Pennsylvania? Is there a way to like prevent it from moving towards New Jersey?
I mean, that's what we're on our radar, So I'm on regional listservs, and I have colleagues in Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut, and wherever. And when something's coming up, they say, I'll ask them. I go, oh, hey, I heard about species X, in Delaware. What do you think about it? Is it going to be a problem for us in New Jersey? So again, it's that communication kind of aspect to it. So yeah, a lot. I talk to the New York people a lot too. So I'll say what I see coming up from New Jersey and maybe heading your way. And there are some coming down the other way as well. So yeah, it's communication is important for sure. I mean, the bigger problem is everyone's under-resourced. That's why it's like this triage fallback, kind of thing. It's like, well, we can't stop this one, that one. How about like stage 0, start fighting back? If you can't go after something that has 10 populations in your state, then what the hell are you doing? It's not that easy, but that's the gist. Is there's not enough resources. We have to be, the old the historical, don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes. That's basically how we try to discipline ourselves. Stop wildly going after problems you can't solve. Focus on things you can solve. And that's what I always tell the local strike teams. It's like don't start something you can't finish. It sounds like something my father would have said to me. But it's true. Stop, be disciplined. Think things through, your entire strategy. Decide from the word go if you have enough gas in your tank to finish it. And if you don't, then don't start. There's just too little resources in stewardship for us to be wasting our time. Yeah.
What are your strategies for tugboat?
It's not hard. There are some species that are just like wowzers, are they impossible to kill. So fortunately though, my colleague Art Gover in Penn State, their cooperative extension program does research on how to kill particular plants. Strangely enough, he came up with something. So it takes a particular herbicide, or I think it was a couple herbicides that they found were effective. And you spray them this time of year, which is extremely odd. So just right before they go completely dormant, whack it with herbicide. They bring it down into their roots and it kills them, or 90+%. Then the next year you do it again.
Oh,
So, there are optimal times to kill any species, but if you spray barberry, anytime, it's gonna die no matter when you do it. And it might be more effective if you did it at a particular time, but no one ever had to bother figuring it out because whenever you did it, it died. Like, what are you doing here? Why do we have to overthink this? But mugwort, no one was having luck. So they did the research and they found these herbicides at this time is the way to go. You know, you could put Roundup on it any time of year. Whole thing gets brown. Yeah. The next year you come back and it's like nothing ever happened. It is absolutely remarkable. It has got to be one of the toughest plants ever. So yeah, you sometimes you have to be exactly right, but it is a small number of the invasives that are that way. Some are very good at resprouting, so those can be troubling, and you have to be careful how you go about them. But species like mugwort and Japanese knotweed and what else is really hard to kill? Even things like Phragmites, really clonal things, they all have the same thing in common, a massive undergroup clonal system. Wisteria is hard to kill. My goodness. You know, they all have, a lot of vines are like that. You know, so it has that, there is a theme there. They tend to, it's almost like when we learned how to kill wisteria, we were like, yeah, like, oh, well, this is a humongous patch. You know, we can't do all this at once. You know, we'll do this side this year, then we'll do this side next year, and then we'll do this side and this side. Oh my God, it's not. All right, we'll do this side, and then we'll hit all of it at once. And I was like, the battle cry was, it's one giant organism, kill it all. You know, it's like a sci-fi movie. You know, like you literally can kill. Yeah, exactly. If you do not get every branch and tentacle at once, you are absolutely doing nothing. So yeah, you learn things like that over time. But yeah, most invasives, you put the correct herbicide on them and they die, and you're good. But it's not, most of the time, it's not about how hard it is to kill it, it's just that there's so much of it. That's more of the problem.
Do you only focus on Sylvian species, or do you have strike teams for like coastal species as well? Because I know like Asiatic sand sedge.
Yeah. We haven't personally, as the strike team, done much, but I know others have worked on it. Monmouth County and the state has, I think, worked on it in Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
So we haven't personally done it, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, the other fallback besides like emerging yes or no is in prioritizing invasive control work. Is there something very special here? Like if it's something special, I don't even want the most common invasive to overrun it. So the special place creates a very high priority.
Right.
But yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with that. I do know that people wanted to dig it up. And actually the coastal regulations was prohibiting that. So you actually had to spray it with herbicide. You could not dig it up because they didn't want people pulling stuff out of the dunes and stuff. But yeah, I don't know how hard that is to kill personally, but it is definitely a problem where there's some very unique plants.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sticking around. So if you don't mind, would you be okay with me sharing your contact information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we do. I mean, we do these outreach type events so people can reach out.
Right.
Yeah, reach back out. Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, I will send out Dr. Van Clough's email address and presentation for reference if you want to look back. So don't hesitate to direct your questions to him.
Yeah, thanks so much. Do you ever do outreach with doctors?
I do outreach all over the place.
Okay.
It depends on how far south, like